Okay, well, good day to everybody out there from Jeremy Medeiros and JP Rouja on World Rewilding Day on the 20th, I believe it is, of March 2024. And very appropriate because Nonsuch Island is in fact one of the earliest examples of a rewilding project that there is anywhere, because this project began in 1960. Back then we called it ecological restoration, same thing, more or less, different name. And at that time it was thought that it wasn't going to work because it was thought that you could never restore something natural, a natural habitat that had been destroyed by man. One of the real, I guess, stars or figureheads, of the whole Nonsuch rewilding has been the reintroduction of Bermuda's national bird, the endemic and critically endangered kahal, or Bermuda petrel, from tiny little half-acre rocks like Green Island, way there off the southern tip of Nonsuch. Okay, let's take a look at our chick. Okay, woo, he's big. Now, this is also a deep nest, so I'm going to have to really stretch down. Ooh. Okay. Oh, oh, gee. He was obviously fed last night too, because he just pooped on me as well. I'm just a mess today. I've fallen and wrecked my pants and stuff. And now this is my second pooping by a parent. But you can see how much bigger he is. Now he is a double handful. He has grown beyond a single hand being able to support him, and he was obviously fed last night. A very good way of indicating if he has been fed the previous night is if they poop this mostly fluid gunk on you, which is what he just did. But yeah, he's in good shape. He's quite alert. He's really growing fast. Gosh, he's so far ahead of the curve. And this is good because this is another chick. The father of this bird, the male that occupies this nest, is actually it wasn't part of the original translocation. He was a rehabilitated bird that was abandoned prematurely out on Horn Rock from the C14 nest there. And that rehabilitated bird not only survived, it returned, started nesting in here. It had one female that it nested with for about 6 or 7 years. Did produce about 2 or 3 chicks with, and then that female disappeared. And only in the last about 2 or 3 years has he now paired up with a second mate. And last year was their first egg. It failed, just like the Kahal Cam 2 one. And this is the first chick. And yeah, not only was it the first chick for this pair, but he was the first one to hatch, and he broke the record. He was the earliest kahal hatching that I've recorded in 24 years, of monitoring these birds. So yeah, he's really a record breaker in all terms. He's being fed well. I'm not sure if it's 200 grams, but he's going to be awfully close to it, so we'll see. But yeah, they're just much more bottom. Their balance is better. They start preening each other more. At this point, the down becomes a real pain and often gets stuck in their eyes, so quite often I've helped pull bits of it out. But we'll put him into the weighing bag and see if he is in fact the heaviest chick on the island out of the 24 or 25 chicks that we have here this year. Now, Nonsuch is not only a home for kahals recently, but it is also the site, and we have our first 200 plus gram chick. And let me just record this first. Let's see. 209 grams. Yep. So I'm very happy about that. Yeah, but it's not just kahals on Nonsuch. Nonsuch is actually it's what we call a ecological restoration experiment, or nowadays that's known as rewilding. Back then we called it ecological restoration. And the general thought when this project begun in the very early 1960s is that it couldn't be done. It was crazy. It was a fool's errand, because once you destroy nature, the prevailing idea at that time was in the 60s, once you destroy it, that's it. Man is incapable of recreating or rewilding an area back to anything what it looked like before, with the diversity and everything else. Well, that has proven to be wrong. There are many hundreds, if not thousands, of rewilding projects going on around the planet now. That is the best hope for many critically endangered species of plants, animals, invertebrates, you name it, because a lot of them, almost 100% of their original habitat has now been destroyed, because man is a very greedy species. Is that he's not content until he dominates every place that he becomes a part of, every location he lives in, and we often spare very little thought for the thousands of other species, in fact worldwide millions of species that we have. Planes flying over the island, which is a bit unusual. We don't normally have them coming over this far. So it's becoming more and more important to areas, particularly offshore islands, because they have a simplified ecosystem generally. There have been some very successful experiments. Nonsuch was one of the very first ones. It was done by my predecessor, Dr. David Wingate. He was primarily watching and monitoring the kahals out here on the 4 tiny little offshore islands. That's why they weren't nesting at Nonsuch then. They hadn't since about 1620. They had been wiped out by the early settlers on Nonsuch and all other large islands in Bermuda. And so while he knew he would probably never see it in his lifetime, in fact he has lived to see them on Nonsuch, it just took new techniques and new technology to be developed to get them here. But he did start a complete reforestation using native and endemic species. He had planted in excess of 10,000 individual plants of about 140 different species, more or less, on Nonsuch Island. In the 24 years since I've taken over the project, I've planted roughly about another 6,000. But that work was essentially finished about 10 years ago, because we had planted everywhere we wanted to. And in fact, now we're actually having to cut back certain species like the bay grapes, which have proven to be a bit too monopolistic and a bit too aggressive, even though they are a native species. They make it very difficult for the birds to dig out their burrows, because the roots just completely occupy every bit of ground and they're too tough for the birds to go through. So this guy is just he's just trying to get out of the sun, and he's turning around trying to figure out. So I'm just gonna measure his wing chord, which again is no doubt the biggest. Yeah, and he's up to 50 millimeter already, so that's again by far he is going to be one of these birds that I believe is fledging out to sea in mid-May. Good month ahead of average, 2 to 4 weeks ahead, because he's already approaching his first month. It's not quite there yet, but by next week, he'll be 1/3 fledged. So he's distinctly bigger than the others. So he looks great. He was obviously fed again last night, hence the copious poop all over my shirt sleeve. Put this nest. It's a very deep one. It's an amazing story, because this nest and the one downhill from it, I actually built myself as just a project, because we were starting to get them nesting, and I thought, well, I got to keep on building new ones every year. But it was a bit late before I started, and I had finished the nest chamber, but the entrance tunnel was only about half completed. And this returned, bird, this bird that had been rehabilitated, kahal, started going in and taking over the nest and claiming it for his own before the nest was even complete. It was the same thing with 820 down there. They were basically occupied before they were completed, and then I had to wait for the rest of the season, and they attracted mates to both nests very quickly. But I hadn't finished, and it wasn't until they finally left. Neither of them produced eggs that first year. That was their initial year of getting to know each other and taking over the nest. And only then was I able to finish the the outer half of the entrance tunnel to there. So that's how fast it can happen. Literally before you're even finished building the thing, they're in it. But yeah, Nonsuch Island now has not only become the real future home. It could support literally, we think, 5 to 8,000 pairs of kahals ultimately, like a century from now, certainly past my time. But it's also become a home, and in some cases a last resort for a number of other Lazarus species that were thought to have been extinct, but like the kahal were rediscovered. That includes 2 species of endemic land snail, which were completely wiped out in Bermuda, except one was found surviving in a alleyway in the capital city, Hamilton, because none of the predators could get to it through all the concrete and asphalt. And the other one was found literally just a year or 2 before it went extinct in the wild along the South Shore in a nature reserve. Both of those have been introduced to Nonsuch. The larger of the 2 snails, Pasilizonites bermudensis, it's been a completely successful thing. They were captive bred at Chester Zoo in the UK, and something like 16,000 of them have been translocated here, and to a number of other small offshore islands, and a couple of onshore sites around Bermuda over the last 10 years or so. Unfortunately, they have not survived in any of the mainland sites and in most of the other islands, because some of the predatory snails or carnivorous flatworms had already arrived on those islands. It's only been on 4 islands where they've done well, and that's include Nonsuch is the best. The population now of the larger one is thought to be in excess of 100,000 individuals now. So that has been wildly successful, and they occupy the entire eastern third of Nonsuch Island, and they're spreading rapidly at about a good 50 to 100 meters a year up the island towards the buildings and towards these sites, and of course they would pose no problem for that. We also have one of the best populations of the endemic Bermuda skink, which is our only remaining endemic terrestrial reptile on the island. And we also have the only populations that are increasing right here around this colony. Since we've been getting more and more kahals nesting here, they spend a lot of time in the nests. In fact, one of my checks just a few minutes ago, when I opened the nest lid, there was a large adult skink about 7 or 8 inches long sheltering under the edge of it. It jumped down into the nest and greatly alarmed the chick that was in there. But they actually coexist peacefully with the birds. The birds don't even try to drive them out. They have a very essential job of keeping insect populations in these underground burrows down. They also eat spilled food, the droppings from the chick and such, and if any eggs break or chicks die, they will scavenge that, and so that it's a nice, clean, healthy nest for the next year when the kahals return for the next breeding season. So they seem to have a semi-symbiotic relationship. And the nest burrows provide essential habitat, especially in the winter months, for these warmth-loving skinks to live in. Great source of food, great source of shelter. We have been monitoring the skink population, Gerardo Garcia in particular from Chester Zoo, and the population in this thing has been monitored for the last 15 years or so. It's thought to have increased from only about 8 to 12 individuals in this area way back in 2014 or so. The latest estimate is something like 70 to 80 or so skinks now exist around this colony And so as you're helping one species, we're helping the kahal, but we're inadvertently also assisting the skink. This is the only skink population that we know of in Bermuda that is actually increasing in size. All the other ones are either static, they've reached their carrying capacity, or they're declining, or they've actually disappeared in the last few years. It's not hopeful that the skink will be able to survive in the main islands of Bermuda over the next 10 years. It will probably go extinct. It will only be small satellite islands, offshore islands like Nonsuch and Trunk Island, hopefully, as well as others, that they will be able to survive on. Feral cats and other predators are just too devastating to them. They just don't have the adequate defenses to cope with them on the main islands of Bermuda. Yeah, so everything is looking good. I'm going to continue with my check. I think I still have about another 5 or 6 chicks to go. And so I'm just going to make the rounds, and you can see all of the nests here of 3 different types. That's basically, you know, we've just tried every design we know, and the neat thing is now they're virtually all occupied by breeding pairs now. So I have to keep on building more and more new ones every year, and more new pairs occupy them, and so it's a great problem to have. So from Jeremy and JP from Nonsuch Island, Bermuda, it's a great day to carry out a kahal chick check on the first day of spring. World Rewilding Day, I believe it is. JP had told me, so very appropriate. And from a beautiful Nonsuch Island, Bermuda. All the best.